And I'm really very excited to welcome you to this exclusive launch of PWC's Global Thought Leadership Future of India, the Winning Leap. And for those of you who are joining us from across the globe, we have a global webcast going on. Very warm welcome, and thank you very much for taking out time to join us today. Today will go down in PWC's history as a day when we initiated conversation on the transformation changes in our country, its companies, and what our citizens could experience in the coming years. And from PWC, we are very privileged to have with us our global chairman, Dennis Nelly. He's come from US especially for this press launch. And we also have our chairman, Deepak Kapoor, and Shashank Tripathi, who is the leader for PWC's strategy practice. And it is his team, he has led the team for the research of this particular report. And with that, I request our India chairman, Deepak Kapoor, to start the proceedings.
Well, thank you, Nandini. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for making time to be here today at this exciting launch of PwC's flagship thought leadership program, The Future of India, the Winning Leap. As chairman of PwC India, it gives me absolutely great pride to talk about the key findings from our report and perhaps kick off what I hope will be an ongoing conversation on the transformational changes in the country, within its companies, and our citizens who could experience all of that in the coming years. You know, when we began the research some 6 months ago, we were inspired by what we saw as a real sense of urgency and optimism in India's private sector. Urgency in the sense that now more than ever, we see the clear need to deliver shared prosperity and economic security to our citizens. And optimism, because our corporate sector was once again feeling increasingly engaged in this national building process. And as we met with vast range of our clients, talked with our other stakeholders, and observed the build-up to the exciting national electoral process, we realized that these feelings of ours were shared very widely by others. And encouraged by the response, we asked the million-dollar question: what would it take for India to grow at 9% per annum over the next 20 years? The clear answer from our research is that we will need to pioneer new resource-efficient techniques to meet the needs of our growing and aspirational citizenry. We call this, ladies and gentlemen, the winning leap. One of the required capabilities is around partnering, and we believe that's an important step. We believe that our ability to develop and implement new models of partnering will play a critical role in achieving our winning leap ambition. And different types of partnering is what we are talking about. Partnering between government and the private sector, partnering between the private sector and the entrepreneurs, and partnering between civil society institutions and both government and private sector. And last but not the least, partnering among the private sector. I would like to request our global chairman, Dennis Nelly, to share his perspective on the subject and the report, and also on India's potential to take the winning leap. Thank you. Over to you, Dennis.
Thanks, Deepak, and good afternoon, everybody. It's really great to be back in India. In fact, I believe this is my fourth trip to India this year, so a country that I'm learning to get to know very well and have a good perspective on in terms of what the future and the potential holds. You know, as I visit India each year, each time, I'm really struck by the enormous potential that exists for the growth here. Its vibrant culture, most notably the world's largest democracy, as well as its very young and inspirational youth. who will be the ones who both power India's growth in the short term, but also the longer term, and clearly they have the most to gain from it. Of course, I wouldn't be here in India if it wasn't one of PwC's most important markets. We've been in this country, as many of you know, for now well over 130 years, and I'm proud to say that the best is really yet to come. We've launched this report. I've already had tremendous confidence about India and its future, but when I see what we've been able to do with the research, we built an aspirational model that confirms a lot of the thinking that are inherent in the report itself, meeting with many of India's leading business leaders and social thinkers. From my perspective, I will tell you this optimism only increased. And I'm happy to share with you that the network of PwC within India has already 9,000 employees right here within India, and we're planning on doubling that number within 3 years. And again, that suggests how we think about the enormous potential that exists for this country. We believe in the growth story of India, and we want to be a part of it from a PwC standpoint. India has enormous potential, and that's why I believe that India's aspiration of reaching 99% growth is certainly attainable. One of the key components of this story, as you will read in the report, will be the role of international investors. We project that to reach this goal, we will need to increase the annual level of investment in India sixfold. That's right, sixfold in constant dollar terms. And while India's saving rate is actually high, this increase cannot happen without a manifold increase in foreign direct investment. We also believe, importantly, that India will have to boost investment and research and development from about 0.08% of GDP to 2.4% of GDP by the year 2034. A significant increase in R&D if the innovation and potential of this country is to be realized. Clearly, this has got tremendous potential to drive productivity enhancements, but it also able to boost solutions that are fundamentally nonlinear today, which is a big component of achieving that 9% growth. Multinationals, we believe, have an important role to play as well, even as we believe that the flow of ideas will not be one way. As chairman of PwC, I can say for certain that India is a strong contributor to our best global ideas and innovative business practices. And as more and more companies build capabilities in concert with Indian companies, they will develop solutions for India that have true global international potential. In our report, we suggest a series of administrative as well as structural changes, such as procedural simplification and allowing for more consolidated tax-paying systems to be implemented, that we believe can actually benefit and improve India's international rankings and help improve the environment, address the concerns of international investors, and also turbocharge the amount of FDI that is really critical to drive this country forward. These same reforms would also allow more Indian entrepreneurs, both existing and potential, to build, to grow employment opportunities. Entrepreneurs, as Deepak said, also need to partner with corporates to build their own skill sets, gain access to capital, and to new markets. And you should know that PwC is ready to play a convening role, and we are eager to hear the ideas and perspectives of key stakeholders in both government, the private sectors, and the international community, among others. I would now like to ask Shashank, our strategy leader here in India, to share some of our findings in more detail, in particular how the private sector in India may need to think about their preparedness for the winning leap. Shashank, over to you.
As has been said, this has been a culmination of work which started roughly 6 months back, and it has roughly 5 parts to the story. The first really relates to the ambition that Dennis and Deepak have shared. The second 3 parts is how to get it delivered. And the last is if you have the commitment, the cohesiveness to deliver it, what will it produce for us as a national economy? So in some ways, what is the ambition? How do we get it done? And what would be the result? And how to get it done is critical for PwC, because we believe that it's not just about thinking lofty ideals and ideas, it's about getting it done, which is how this report stands out in my mind. In the next 10 years, the economy will be more than double. But essentially, we're talking about a growth which will create, broadly speaking, 4 Indias between now and the next 20 years. Currently, we are at 1.9, and it'll be 10 trillion. And that's a significant leap. But beyond the numbers, beyond GDP, what is also evident is that we needed to do something which recognizes that this is a nation of 1.25 billion people. And over the next few years, 20 years, that will become a nation of 1.5 billion people. So if we do not consider the human development aspect of this growth, it would be a short-lived victory, so to speak. And therefore, when we looked at Human Development Index, the nation has taken about a 0.11 leap over the last 20 years. We are suggesting a 0.26 shift in HDI. And as you know, HDI is a UNDP index which measures education, which measures health, which also measures gross national product per capita. But it's a mixed bag of things which allows equitable growth. It's not just growth in one sector, it's a growth across sectors. And it's a growth that recognizes that in India, you have to carry 1.25 billion people with you. Essentially, we interviewed roughly 80 leaders. Almost 2/3 of those were classic business leaders. There were many who were also in the social sector, and there were some academicians, and there are some sector experts. So we had a broad Catholic view of where insights would come from. Then we dove deep in sectors with our own sector experts, both global and Indian, where we looked at what are the specific strategies that we would have to take in sectors. And I'll come to that in a minute. And finally, we also did some, what I would say, extensive modeling. We partnered with Oxford Economics, which is a well-renowned firm we have used before, to see what is the macroeconomic picture. There are 3 phrases which crept up as we looked at these sectors. One is fierce catch-up, which is let's do what we have already tested before, but do it with commitment, with diligence, with speed. Second is what we're calling significant leap. Let's take those things which have been tested elsewhere, but are applicable in India. And thirdly, let's talk about leapfrogging. And mind you, the winning leap is a combination of all these 3 things. If you look at all the sectors over the next 20 years, you will see that there is, roughly speaking, 40% new methods which will constitute the economy of the 10.4 trillion. Clearly, this is an aspiration. This is not a given. We have to work hard to get to that point. But that is a significant statement. What we are saying is up to $3.5 trillion of new economy will be created, which is more than roughly 1.5 to 2 times of the current Indian economy. That's a daunting task. That's a significant shift in the way the economy will have to operate. And this is where the story turns a bit more towards the corporate sector. This nimbleness, this ability to shape a new nation, a new economy, of course, requires a tremendous amount of support from the government, but it requires leadership from the private sector. And I use the word private because it has both corporate and entrepreneurial sector in it. Essentially, we are talking about these 5 key winning themes which will guide the growth of most corporations as they become world-beating companies, world-class companies. And our belief is that every sector requires to create corporate champions. And I don't think this is limited to Indian companies. International companies are coming to India and becoming world-class emerging market champions as well. And very briefly, the first key theme is the customer of tomorrow is much more empowered and informed than he is today. Second is clearly that the economy requires a lot of flexibility because of this shift as we talk about. And there are many ways of articulating that flexibility on the front end, channels, on the back end, how do you make sure your business model is right? In order to make this leap, just thinking of traditional sources of capital, resources, will, I think, be short-sighted. Therefore, we are saying that non-traditional partnership, non-traditional resources, and there's a phrase that came across, tri-sector partnerships. Can you partner with the government? Can you partner with society to take your company forward? How do you build new capabilities in that sense? And finally, a fundamental shift in the mindset of growth. It has to be growth which is led through innovation. Dennis mentioned this. It has to be a mindset which asks of the company and to think about the future plan for it in R&D, in innovation, in the way you behave with respect to creating new solutions, may I say, products. And at the end of the day, this can't happen if the DNA of the company is integral, by which I mean that accountability from the top, integrity, and diversity. And these are three themes which have resonated, not only because we want it for the right reasons, because I come back to my first theme, the customer is demanding it. Partnerships are demanding it. Most global companies are not just looking for technical expertise, they're looking for a certain integrity in the way a company operates here. If I then switch over to the entrepreneurial sector, I would say very briefly, and this has been touched upon by Deepak, that what came out very clearly in our research, that ease of business is important. But also, what is important is the government to play a convening role in creating national platforms. Unless you have a digital platform, unless you have a physical platform of getting goods and services from A to B, you will not create the platform for others to take a leap, including the entrepreneurial sector. But what was, I would argue, more surprising is the tremendous interest from corporations in helping entrepreneurs to grow. And you will see in the report some specific examples of that. But there was a widespread recognition that if you want to create the right caliber of company, a world-class company, that it has to be supported by an entrepreneurial supply chain, mentorship, incubation, and how do you give them access to markets so they are able to grow with you in that sense. And finally, of course, access to capital. Things have been talked about, but that also has to take a profound shift. It's not just about balance sheet financing. It should be about financing teams, financing ideas, because this new economy will require all of that. But in our mind's eye, productivity has to increase. Manufacturing has to grow from the 16% to roughly 23%. And that is something which is very much in line with what is happening around the Make for India campaign recently. Services will still keep a lion's share. It's not an and/or, we need both. And agriculture will also continue to grow. With respect to jobs, which as we all know is a question which many of us, including myself, ask about the nation, the only scenario which will get us the 240 million jobs that this country needs for the demographic dividend is the winning leap 9% scenario. That's a sobering thought. So when we talk about having an ambition beyond 6 or 7%, I think we have to be very realistic that this is something that we need to get done. And you'll also see that the time for action is now. We can't wait 4 or 5 years to start this investment, this new winning leap thinking. We have to do it now so that these jobs start getting created by 2018, 2020, and then the divergence between the base case and the winning leap situation is not that profound. I'll end by saying there are 5 or 6 key things in summary. One is, yes, it is an ambition, but it's something that we can do. And that's the 9% scenario which will take us to the job creation potential. Not just that, to satisfy the aspirations of a very young nation, which is eager and ready for growth. It has to be focused on key sectors, and those sectors can't be tackled in a linear fashion. That non-linearity that we call the winning leap has a corporate sector to play a very key role in that. Aided, supported, sometimes led by the entrepreneurial sector, with ease of business playing a very, very critical role, and that has been said before. And the quality and the quantum of investment, and I emphasize the quality, not just the quantum, has to shift, where technology has to come in, where we have to be much more profound in the way we think about R&D, where we need to be much more open to accepting and assimilating technology, which will enable the winning leap to happen. And of course, the quantum is high, as I had mentioned before. But finally, it's also a mindset shift. I don't think it's confined to corporations. I think every individual, myself included, and Deepak and I talked about it, PWC included, has to think about the next 20 years as a place where we take our own winning leaps. The company has to take its own winning leap. The corporate sector has to take its own winning leap. And hopefully then the nation will take its own winning leap. I'd end by saying that privileged that we are living at this time. The next 20 years is going to be the largest nation-building exercise that any democracy has ever witnessed. And I'd say that the future of India and the winning leap have a critical role to play in that. Thank you.
So I'll open it up for questions.
So if you're talking about $10 trillion and you have a per capita income of roughly around $1,600, so what does it mean for individual prosperity and also for the poverty elevation?
Good. Thank you, Sanjay. That's a good question. First of all, let me just say that the report is not about making any projections as such. It's talking about three scenarios, as Shashank explained. And of course, the most aggressive scenario, the winning leap part, is where one is saying that the 10 trillion which you mentioned about is likely to be the figure in 20 years, right? But I think it does have a lot to do with poverty alleviation or making very concrete steps towards that. If I just take a couple of statistics which you said, if you take that $1,600 or so per capita income, if all of that, what Shashank explained, needs to happen for one to achieve that aspirational goal in 2034, that figure is likely to be $6,800 per capita. So that's one statistics point. And if also, what Shashank mentioned was 240 million jobs, the prosperity as far as the country is concerned, which is connected to poverty alleviation, as well as getting something useful, gainful to be done by our young force, 240 million jobs need to be done. And that, when you do a reverse calculation, gives us again a figure of around 9%, which needs to be done.
Could you very confidently say that the worst is over for the Indian economy per se?
If I were in the business of forecasting, I probably wouldn't be in this business. It's a very interesting question, though. If you look back, let's call it 5 to 10 years ago, and you look at the BRIC economies, for example, it's always fascinating to me to see how all of that has changed. 5 to 10 years ago, each of the BRIC economies was clearly moving in a really interesting trajectory, all experiencing good growth, positive growth. Today, you look at the BRICS, and they're all moving in very different directions. Whether you want to point to Brazil, Russia, even China with its slowing growth, et cetera. So a very different environment today than what we've seen and what we've experienced in the past. And what it says to me is that as each of these developing economies continue to evolve on the journey of the development of those economies, you're going to see a continuation of positive development and maybe not so positive developments as these economies really mature down the path. What continues, though, to fascinate me is the enormous potential that this economy really has. And we've sort of highlighted some of that in the report in terms of the population, the favorable demographics, democracy, education, and I could go on for a while on that. And so the potential exists in a very significant way here that doesn't exist in some of the other BRIC countries that I alluded to. Is the best yet to come? I believe that. I think with the change in government here this past May, singling out a very positive, pro-business, pro-investment type of a mindset, creating the right kind of environment for this country to really reach its potential. I think that's all a very positive development. So as we've been saying, each of us up here in our own way, we really believe in the potential of this country, not ignoring challenges, but the benefits are so significant that we're very encouraged by what the future of India holds as we go forward here.
So we'll close with that, and all Dennis, Shashank, and Deepak would be there over lunch. So you're welcome to connect with them and ask whatever else you may like to ask. So thank you very much.